room's ready, y'all. Like many of you, I'm always thinking about how to keep our HR house in order. I like decorum and I like organization because we're realizing that there's always something that can use a little bit more attention, because when you're busy building and supporting the business, it's easy for businesses to realize that policies and processes and even strategy can get a little outdated. Welcome back, y'all, to People Person. I'm Kate Noel, head of People Operations here at Morning Brew Inc. And today's episode is all about a little spring cleaning, okay, within the HR department. Now, what really matters in moments like this is auditing your function, what to look for, and how to make sure everything is actually working the way it should. I'm joined today by Nancy Vitale, who is the Chief People Officer at Omada Health, and we're getting into how to approach this work in a way that's both strategic and practical. Hi, Nancy. I'm so happy to have you with me today for today's conversation. How are you feeling overall before we jump into the things?
I'm good, Kate. How are you feeling?
I'm here, I'm alive, and I'm thankful. So I'll take that for what that is. Like I mentioned, thank you for your yes. Today's conversation, we're talking a little bit about spring cleaning. 'Tis the season, which we spoke a little bit about just before hopping on. But before I get your expertise on things, why don't we tell the people in the back what it is that you do, what does your day-to-day look like, title, all that jazz, and then we'll get into the tea.
You got it. You got it. So I am the Chief People Officer for Omada Health. Omada is a digital healthcare company. We serve members who suffer from chronic conditions, things like diabetes, obesity, hypertension, and I lead the people and culture team. So we shepherd everything people, organization, and culture here at Omada.
Amazing. And I know you're doing a fabulous job. So I have a question for you about spring cleaning in general. When you actually hear that phrase, like what comes to mind when you hear about it, especially given that you are at a CHRO, let me get the letters right, CHRO level. What does that mean to you for yourself personally as the person running charge of your team, but then also how that signals to the rest of the folks who are making the magic happen?
Yeah, I love this topic, and it really got me thinking as I was preparing for our conversation today. I think there's two types of spring cleaning, just to maybe frame it for how I'm thinking about it. One type is just tidying up. Like my desk is a little messy. I need to declutter. I need to clear the way so I can actually see what's going on. What do I need to focus on? And then there might be another kind of spring cleaning, which is maybe a deeper clean. My house needs a remodel. My family is growing and changing and evolving. The needs are changing. I need to do some more deep cleaning. So as I think about this from my role and perspective and with my team, there are things within the people and culture HR function that we simply need to think about tidying up. Where might we have overgrown information, information overload? Our employees, we call them Omadans, can't find information readily. Could be processes or reports or trackers that no longer serve those end customers. But actually, in some ways, we are in a remodel year here at Omada with our people and culture team. We are setting a new vision and 5-year goals at the company level. And one of the things my team is remodeling is a next generation people strategy. And that requires a deeper clean, a deeper introspection. So when I think of spring cleaning, you could run the gamut. Like years past, maybe we were just tidying up. This year, we're going to do a deeper clean.
I love that. And I appreciate you even breaking that down into like two spaces where it's like moving some papers to the side, or like, are we figuring out, are we buying the paper from the right vendor? Like how deep of the work that you're trying to do here? For me personally, even in my personal life, I can't do with the clutter. Like I feel like mentally I can't even think strategically. Like if I come into my home, and this is me just personally, I'm like, I am unwell. I cannot function. And it's the same thing for me, even professionally. So I'm right there with you where you're like, both things matter. It just depends on where your company is. And so it's like exactly like you said, right now within your organization, you are doing a deeper, you're flipping your home, it seems like a little bit with the spring cleaning. I'm curious to know, like, what's even prompted that, right? Like, was it something that broke down? Was it you finally having the chance to sit down after tidying for a few years and say, okay, let's get a little deeper? Like, what was the thing that said to yourself, like, Nancy, we got some things to do?
Yeah, I think it was driven primarily from the business. And that's how I view what we do. We need to kind of like follow the business and be in with the business. So I'd say about 9 months ago, our leadership team started talking about what's the next era for Omada. We went public last year,
Nice.
and we are on a growth trajectory. And part of that is how do we address kind of two forces of change happening in the world, AI and for us, GLP-1s. We're thinking about some new audacious goals over the next 5 years, and we're in the midst of like long range planning and long-term strategy planning at a business. And this got me thinking with our own team. We're a growing organization. Our existing strategy's been in place about 4 years since I started with the company about 4 years ago. And how do we get right in there with the business and the leaders to create a next generation people strategy that's going to serve this next era? And that requires a lot of introspection. And timely enough, usually long range planning and long term strategy development happen around the springtime. So maybe it's just, conveniently coincidental here that we're talking about it. But the other thing that one of my direct reports prompted for the team, because we've done some of this within the organization, is something called value stream mapping. And that is really understanding it's from lean management. I don't know if you're familiar with kind of the old Toyota days and lean principles.
Let's pretend I don't. What do you mean by lean management, and how does that inform what you're sharing with me now?
Yeah, so as we think about value stream mapping, it's a way to identify, understand, and document all of the activities that are involved in serving your end customer. And for us, that is our employee base. And so we were actually together as a leadership team last week, and we spent a whole day just mapping out the different activities from end to end, think hire to retire, of the different things that we're doing. So Omada's been around 15 years.
Okay.
And a lot of the things sometimes get piled up. You think about that from a people and culture perspective. And this was a perfect opportunity. We went public last year. We're growing. We have a new strategy. There was a bit of a reveal, a couple things that revealed to us. We have a lot of systems that maybe create some complexity for our employees and our leaders. How do we simplify that? Platforms and systems and tech. And the other thing that came clear is we have so many metrics that we're tracking, do all of them matter? So it kind of identified for us a preliminary go-get list, and then we're going to come back together in a couple months after having, dove deeper into this to identify what's the to-be state? What do we want to be? What do we want to represent? So this is the early part of that spring cleaning.
Okay, and that's also important to call out too, where spring cleaning is not quite literally the season of spring. This is more so like us starting the conversation and what it looks like, but it could possibly be a year out, 2 years out, et cetera. Is that kind of like what you're sharing as well?
Absolutely. It can be fall, it can be winter, but what is the right season for you within kind of the HR profession? What's going on in your environment? Are there things changing in the talent marketplace? Are there things changing in the internal business climate and environment? And what is your trigger? What is your catalyst for thinking about starting this process around cleaning your house so that you can better serve your end customer?
Nancy, you mentioned next generation people ops strategy. Do you mean generation in its literal sense when you say that, or do you mean something a little bit different?
I mean, we've had a people and culture strategy. We've called it investing in our people since about 4 years ago.
Okay.
And this is going to be not just a simple tweak and update. So every year we've gone through kind of a refresh the last 4 years. And it's happened around this time, kind of a simple refresh. What still makes sense? How do we add, edit? This year, we're kind of setting that aside, the existing people strategy, and we're saying what is going to be required of us in this next chapter for Omada to serve the company best. So it is the next generation. That was the one we have today was like the former generation. This is the next generation of the people strategy that's going to support the business strategy.
Okay. Now, people ops, we tend to be very much in secrecy. We work things in the background. We can be confidential, it's part of the gig. Now, doing a spring cleaning like this though, is this something as an HR leader that I'm shouting from the mountaintops about, like, hey, everybody, we are cleaning up? Or is this more like, look, let's just keep it like a whisper. We're talking amongst our folks and we know. Like, what's your take on how to share the narrative about doing a spring cleaning in the workplace?
Yeah, I think it depends. So we've been planning, for example, this next generation people strategy. We've been planning for it for several months. We just now kind of kicked it off. We haven't been shouting it from the mountaintops because we were waiting for the business and in supporting the business to kind of announce this next 5-year vision and strategy. Now that that's out there, we're being more transparent about how people and culture is going to co-create with the business this next gen strategy. The value stream mapping, that's like getting our own house in order. We're not necessarily like advertising that. That's more like the customers don't need to know all of that, like what's going on there. But what will be helpful for them to participate in at some point is understanding where their biggest pain points are, how we can then identify what things we want to tackle that will bring most value to them. And then, let them, in some ways dictate where we should focus. But we're just in the beginning part of that. And it was more about understanding current state. And we weren't shouting that from the mountaintop.
And that is totally fine. Not everything needs to be everybody's business. Okay. So I'm with you on that. Totally with you. You mentioned buckets, right? You said like there are like themes almost or pillars when conducting the spring cleaning, or at least figuring out where you want to do next. Or what would you like to do next? Pardon me. So what would you consider those pillars to be? Like, as an HR person, what are the spaces I should consider first when it comes to doing an audit or doing my own spring cleaning in that regard?
Yeah. So again, I think it depends on, are we talking a light tidy or are we talking a deep clean? On
Oh,
the
no, we're
light
bringing in
tidy,
the crew. We're bringing in the crew.
we're bringing
Let's say
in the
the
crew.
crew.
So this is
Yeah.
the deep
This
cleaning.
is the deep cleaning. Yeah.
We're
Let's
going
say that.
deep.
Let's go
We're
in
going
deep
deep.
for
Okay.
this one.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to this value stream map, which identified kind of our big bucket of activities that we carry out in order to bring our services to the organization, to leaders and to employees. And for us, those big buckets, those big pillars of opportunity, things like the pre-hire candidate experience or the hire and onboarding experience. Then, as someone gets onboarded and they're more integrating, it's more of those like immersion activities. What are the things we're doing in the first 6 months to immerse new employees? And then there's the ongoing stuff. Some is more, cycle based, annual compensation planning. Some of it is more like ongoing. How do we support more of the day-to-day inquiries that come up? And it can run the gamut all the way through, till we're exiting someone who is leaving the organization. So those were some of those, bigger buckets. I would say the one that's on the side here, that's important for us is marrying that with this next generation people strategy to identify the things we need to support. And I will just say, this has been a little bit of a learning. I've been, in the HR field for over 30 years, but I recently heard an author named David Edwards speak on strategic workforce planning. And it prompted my team and I to think about how to leverage this as a tool to identify the biggest priorities and levers that are going to best answer the question, is our organization fit for its future purpose? And that is also, we're in the midst of just diving into this. And this will be perhaps identify some additional buckets for us as we think about the as is org and the to be org and where we need to ensure the organization is fit for its future purpose.
I love that, because what comes to mind too, as you were speaking, Nancy, is there one pillar more important than the other? If you had to make a ranking of the things you need to work on first, how would you determine that? But it seems as if, based on what you shared in the book that you read, that there is some type of tool kit or some sort to give you that answer as an HR leader or even as a professional doing the work yourself.
Yes, and I think it's dependent on the organization. I wouldn't say there's a universal answer to that. I think, as I, will say to my own team, and I've tried to live by this too, first is you must be a student of the business. You must understand your industry, your environment, what is true for you in the moment to then answer that question, as opposed to saying there's a universal truth, like this is your starting point.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That's fair enough. So let's just say I am in Kate Inc., because obviously I want a company named after myself. So Kate Noel Inc. And my pillar, based on the toolkits that I've used to determine what's the biggest priority, it's compliance and governance, for example. So when reviewing policies and processes, in your opinion, again, 30 years in the game, nothing to snuff at, where would you say an HR person should begin? Like, if you have the experience of reviewing policies or a handbook or et cetera, what would you consider to be the appropriate first step for anyone who's listening or watching us today?
Yeah, I mean, a couple thoughts come to mind. I don't purport to have all the answers. You're the Beyonce of HR. You can, feel free to weigh in here, Kate.
Yes.
But let me throw a couple starting points out
Please.
for us. I would say, just first the policy term. I do think we as HR professionals need to think in terms of what needs to be consistent and compliant because of laws and regulations that we design policies around, and what maybe is better served by guidelines that give managers some degree of discretion, because you don't have to be 100% consistent. And I think just even asking yourself that question might reveal where can we clean up and loosen things up a bit with some appropriate boundaries or guardrails. And where do we need to be really tight, like wage and hour compliance law, for example, versus work flexibility,
Yeah.
thinking in those terms. But that might be a starting point as you think about, compliance, is just the introspection of, do we have too many policies that are constricting or restricting managers too tightly and robbing them of the discretion that they should have?
Yeah.
And do we need to clean that up a bit to loosen the reins and let them manage, give them the skills, help them, support them through resource, but let's not dictate everything through policy or a handbook. But we are about to embark on kind of the next iteration of our employee handbook. And I've been talking to the team about this very point. It's like, there are things we probably do need to make sure are tight and clean and clear in the handbook, but there are other things we shouldn't just throw in there because we can. Let's make sure that we're enabling managers to do what they do best and give them some judgment and discretion flexibility.
Yo, I resonate with that 100%. Like, I think of it in two ways, where it's like purpose and process. So like, in looking at the things that you have in your handbook or guidelines, what's the purpose of it? What's the point? Is it here to exist because you want the handbook to look a little thicker than others? Or is it really serving the employee or talent group that you have as your employees right now? And if some things are antiquated, that's also okay. It's not considered a loss, by the way. Maybe it worked 3 years ago, and based on the demographic now, things have changed. It's okay for things to roll off, and you introduce a remix, if you will, of that. But I also find sometimes certain policies or guidelines, they're fantastic, like by the verbiage of it, but the process is trash. And so it almost then like completely removes the purpose of having the policy, because people hate going through the process to even utilize it, whether it's, parental leave or utilizing PTO, exactly like you said. It's not a one size fits all. But if us as, people culture leaders are not thinking of ways to make it the most efficient, but the most enriching process to utilize it, then you've lost the whole folk. You lost everybody. No one even cares about it anymore because the process was 0 stars, and they're going to give a Yelp review, AKA Glassdoor, and talk about how terrible it was. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of like been my thinking about it. And I know you're laughing because you agree with that as well. I'm sure you've had experiences seeing that.
Yeah, for sure. I love how you frame that in terms of think about the purpose and think about the process that serves that purpose. Because, one or both of those may be off, and you need to really be thoughtful about which one you're tackling. I like that.
Yeah, I try my best, friend. I try my best. I'm just riffing off of you. But okay, so I have a few more questions. Let's do it like a lightning round, if you will. Like, talk about efficiency, talk about process. We won't be quick with it. But I'm really, really curious, Nancy, to hear like your take on some of these things. And it has to do with spring cleaning still. So whatever bubbles up in your spirit first, we'll just go with it, okay?
Okay.
All right. First up, what do you think is one policy most companies need to rewrite? Already hit you with a big one.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, this is lightning round. You're causing me to really think deep on this. Again, I think it's company dependent, and I'm going to reframe this because you know what came to mind. I was still on your prior comment around like leaves,
Okay.
and I will say for us, one recent change we made was to outsource accommodations. Uh, because we found that was such a time suck for our own internal team.
Mm.
And one of our vendors could readily take that on. So, sorry, I'm changing the question on you already, Kate, violating the rules of your podcast here. But
Shame, shame,
I know,
shame.
I know, I know. I apologize.
It's all
But
good.
that's literally what came to mind is, as you think about, for me, it was like thinking about the process and are there opportunities to automate or outsource that would like something else would make it better, easier, faster
Hmm.
for you and your end customer.
Okay. HR tool that you think us folk are not using enough when it comes to the things that we're doing.
I was wondering if we could get through this podcast without
You
talking
know,
about.
you know, we couldn't, friend. You had to. It's as
Am
much
I
as we.
am I allowed to say the two letters?
It's not a trigger word, so you can drop it on down. Go
Okay.
ahead.
All right. It's AI. It's
Uh-huh.
AI, Kate. I think. I mean, you can't avoid it. I was at a dinner with some fellow chief people officers last night, and it was the topic of conversation. Every conversation is centering around this. It's
Hmm.
unavoidable. But I do like what surfaced in that discussion was there are still, folks who, are fearful of it and understandably, or who aren't carving out the time or the mind space or, having the right mental model in terms of embracing it. And it's only recently that things started to click for me personally, but the only way to get in it is to experiment. And for me, I'm like, we use Perplexity here at Omada. So I was using Perplexity to teach me how to do some things differently in my team and processes.
Hmm.
And so I'll give you one quick example. I had the AI teach me how to automate our quarterly dashboard. And this week was the first time we kind of used it at my leadership team. And what it resulted in was like removing some head trash for the team.
Okay.
It was like it lightened the cognitive load because as opposed to our prior like spreadsheets and PowerPoints, they just had to go into the space, which is more like a dynamic dashboard, and quickly do their updates. So what it enabled for us is to be able to spend more quality time on like quick hit visual, like I get what's going on here. And let's talk about the things that are like yellow or red, or the things that are going to matter most, like
Hmm.
as we do our look back too, what worked well, what didn't. So apologies. I was challenging myself if we could get through this discussion without talking about AI, but it's
Hmm.
honestly unavoidable.
No, it was a setup set by me. I mean, that's literally
Oh,
on me.
Kate,
That was my
you
fault,
tricked me.
girl. It was me. I was like, as soon as the words came out my mouth, I said, I am setting Nancy up and she's gonna fall right into it. That is on me. All right. So in that case, then let me do better by you in this last one and see what you think. So we talked a little bit about auditing policies, handbook, and whatever. So if you had the charge to make something more generous, would you make the RTO policy more generous for your organization or PTO?
Oh, interesting. We don't have RTO because we don't have an office.
I know that's right.
We are a remote first company. So sorry, right back at you. I got you, Kate.
Dang, she got me
Um,
back, y'all. Damn, revenge is sweet. So I feel like I got my
but
answer.
here's what I would say.
Uh-huh.
Every company is different. For us, I would redefine it because
Okay.
one of the things that we are investing more in this year is more in-person time. So we don't have an office. We are remote first, but we believe in in-person time, quality in-person time, and we recognize we needed, in some cases more in-person time. So it's something that we're leaning into. It's not a once and done either. Oh, remote first, we're not remote only. No, we got to keep leaning into it, which again, I'll bring it back to spring cleaning. It's iterative, right? You got to constantly look at this stuff.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not a once and done.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I guess at that point, what else can I say to that? That was perfectly wrapped up for our conversation overall. Like between our hooting and our hollering, talking about spring cleaning and how we can make our team, ourselves even better, and knowing that like, hey, let's not feel constrained to a time frame. Can you start now? Absolutely. But don't feel like you need to do it within the next 90 days. Like that's barely onboarding for someone. So be mindful of the fact that this is a long-term strategy. And Nancy, based on how you're doing the work of the research, the due diligence, making sure that the business is informing how you want to show up for yourself and your team, those folks are in capable hands. Thank you for sharing all that information with us. And maybe we can do some own internal reflection professionally as well.
I appreciate it, Kate. Thanks for having me.
Anytime, friend. All right, y'all. We done talked about cleaning so much, it smells like fabuloso up in here, okay? That means we did the things right. If nothing else, consider this your gentle reminder that just because your HR processes exist, it doesn't mean they can't use a little refresh, okay? So if this episode had you side-eyeing your policy just a little bit, or your process, or honestly just your entire HR folder, girl, same, okay? So start small. Pick one thing and we can clean it up together. All right. Nancy, once again, thank you for having such an amazing conversation with all of us. And look, for y'all listening, I appreciate your attention span, but also I appreciate some questions. So if you have any or hot takes, feel free to send that over to peopleperson@morningbrew.com. We'd love to hear what you're working through. And of course, thanks for tuning in. I'll see y'all next time.